mare quanto è bello.
Ciao folks, here we are today making a puttanesco, also called St. John's pasta. It's popularized traditionally non-Catholic wise by prostitutes making a quick dish between tricks. And so they start off with olive oil, and I'm using the olive oil from a couple of ounces of anchovy fillets. I'm cheating and adding a little bit of butter, clarified butter called ghee by the Indians. It's got a little bit of herbs infused in it. A little added pure olive oil. It doesn't need to be extra virgin because when you're cooking with it, it's going to lose its oomph anyway, and it's less expensive to use the pure. So I'm going to fire up the stove with these things going. And once it gets to almost smoking hot, I will then begin by adding the first ingredient, which are finely chopped shallots. This is 2 large finely chopped shallots, about 5-6 ounces. Here we are with 2½ large finely chopped shallots, which is the first ingredient, added to the oil and the butter. After about 2½–3 minutes, the shallots become a little more translucent, and the next ingredient that we're adding will be the finely chopped bell peppers. They're cut confetti, which is about the size of your pinky nail. After the shallots start to brown and become translucent, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes, and you move them around the whole time. The second ingredient you want to add are your, I've got a small chopped, finely chopped red, green, and yellow bell pepper, and that's the next ingredient. We're going to put a lid on this and let it simmer for about 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, I have a bay tree, Mediterranean bay tree in my yard. I planted when I moved here. I had a restaurant in Seattle for 25 years, and the second year in I planted a Mediterranean bay tree, and when I left and sold the property, it was 40 feet high. The one I planted here is still only about 4 feet high, but it produces really beautiful bay, so I added 3 bay leaves to this, the mix of ingredients, the shallots and the peppers, and now I'm adding about 4 ounces of finely chopped garlic. We'll saute that for an additional 4 to 5 minutes. And again, to seal the flavors, I'm going to add a lid and put it back on there and seal the deal. Alright, our next ingredient here is 1 finely chopped small fennel bulb, fennel root. In Sicily and in the south of Italy, it's a pivotal ingredient in so many sauces. I add it just because it works. It sweetens things up a little bit because we've got a lot of the ingredients in here, the capers, some of the peppers, the Salonika peppers, the olives are all somewhat piquant. So this actually kind of balances the flavor out some. So then we got 1 finely chopped fennel root. You add that, you only have to saute that for about another, say, a minute, and then the next ingredient are the peppers, the finely chopped Greek peppers. So, there we have it. So, therefore, again, here we go with the shallots, the peppers, the garlic, the fennel root, and the Salonika peppers. We want to saute all those together again. The next step here is to add the capers. And I put about 2½ ounces in. I'm going to saute those for just about, not even maybe 30 seconds, a minute. Before we're adding some chilies, before we add the chilies, which I ground with fennel seed in like a coffee grinder or a spice grinder. So we're adding about 1 ounce of a combination of about ½ an ounce of chilies and about a ½ an ounce of fennel seed, and which will pick it up with a little bit of spice. It'll make it a little more piquant. The next ingredient are the olives. We've got Spanish olives and Kalamata olives. I left the Spanish olives whole because they're tiny, and the Kalamatas are sliced. So that's about 3 ounces, 4 ounces of each. And you saute those for a while. Give it about, let's say, maybe another minute, minute and a half. In 1975, when I graduated from high school, I ended up in around Hood River, Oregon, working in D Flats, which is basically the base of Mount Hood. As I ended up being a foreman on a pear, apple, and peach orchard. And Don Wakamatsu's grandparents, who had the farm next door, became my buddies in it. And it was really cool that I remember Don running around as a wee child while I was a teenager. That was my introduction to the Northwest. I met Lou De Laurenti at De Laurenti's on a trip to Seattle, and we talked about me maybe working for him someday. And he said, well, why don't you get a hold of me while you're working in the orchards in Hood River? And I called him from a phone booth, and he offered me a job as assistant deli manager, and that's how I ended up in Seattle. That was 1981. I worked for Lou for about 4 or 5 years, and then I became the chef at the Pink Door shortly after Jackie Roberts opened it in the mid-'80s. I worked there for a couple of years, and then eventually in 1990 I opened my own place, Brad's Swingside Cafe in Fremont, which had a 25-year run, and I closed in 2015. The next ingredient is our inexpensive, cheap boxed red wine. This is a Cabernet from Chile, which is robust and really works real well with this certain recipe. So I'm adding about a healthy cup and a half of red wine. You'll want to simmer that, cook it until the alcohol is completely dissolved from it before we add our herbs and our spices, which is going to be the next step. So it'll take about a minute and a half to dissolve or reduce the alcohol out of the wine. In this case, you want to leave the lid off. And then we have about an ounce of dried thyme. You want to put it between your hands and rub it like that, so it releases the oils. The next thing is oregano, and the same thing, about 1.5 ounces, maybe a little bit more, 2 ounces, and you want to rub it between your hands. And then, lastly, we've got smoked paprika, again about 2 ounces. We are now boiling our water for our spaghetti, which we're going to have with our puttanesca with prawns today. For our lunch after the demonstration is over. We wish you were here to dine with us. Anyway, so I'm boiling about 4 quarts of water with some sea salt, and then I'll cook the spaghetti in it, moving it around pretty gently with these tongs for about 7 minutes until it's al dente. Strain it, and then we'll saute our prawns with our puttanesca and top it off, and we'll be ready to go. We'll have lunch.
So I have a question for you. A lot of people put olive oil in their water. Do you do that with yours?
I only do that with fettuccine. Fettuccine has a tendency to stick together for some reason, but all the other cuts don't need olive oil, and it's kind of a waste of the oil. Okay, now it's time for our anchovy fillets. Before we add the tomatoes, I've got 4 ounces. That's or 5 ounces. It's 2.5 ounce cans. And that might seem like a bit much, but to me, I love anchovies, so it's not a bit much. If you don't like anchovies, you can just leave it out entirely. If you only like them a little bit, just add 1 can. But I also chop them before I add them, so they dissolve pretty rapidly. And with the wine in there, that'll really assist in that whole maneuver. Our next to last ingredient are the tomatoes. So in this case, again, we have a couple of these 10-ounce cans, 14-ounce cans of diced fire roasted tomatoes. So both cans in. If you like less tomato, add less. If you like more tomato, you can add more. It's a moderate amount of tomato traditionally in Italy. So this is actually about perfect for the traditional Napolitano style of puttanesca. Okay, lastly, we have the fresh chopped flat leaf parsley and fresh basil right out of my garden. And that's the last thing you want to add. It will be a slow simmer, so you want to lower the heat and let it cook. This is considered to be a quick sauce, so the time that we made it, it's not one of those sauces like a bolognese or a marinara that you let simmer all day. This is a quick sauce, thus, the sort of terminology with the puttanesca reference. So that, you go into the house, you have some ingredients in the cupboard, you might have a couple of things handy in the fridge, and you're ready to fly with it. So we'll let it simmer for about maybe 3 to 5 more minutes, and the sauce will be ready. Okay, now that our water has come to a boil, I've got about almost 5 quarts of water. I'm adding about a healthy third of a cup of salt. That's sea salt. And we're going to cook in that about 2/3, 3/4 of a pound of spaghetti. When you cook spaghetti, you don't need to add oil to the water, but you do want to salt it first. You want to let it sit for about between 30 and 40 seconds before you start to move it. That way it starts to kind of wilt and you don't break it when you start to move it. You want to use long tongs when you do. So here we go. So it'll take about, according to the box here, and I'm just using an inexpensive box from Safeway, it says 6 to 7 minutes cooking time, which is pretty much right. If you want it a little more al dente, go 5 minutes. My Sicilian family actually wanted it to like literally still have a crunch, which is fine. You know, if you're going to want to pre-cook it and then cool it down, that's taboo these days. You want to keep the starch, the integrity of the starch intact. But still, people like to cook their pasta ahead of time and cool it down and coat it with a little bit of olive oil, and there's nothing wrong with that, where you just reheat it on the fly. That works as well. So here we are, about 3/4 of a pound of pasta and about 5 quarts of boiling salted water. It's going to take about 6 to 7 minutes.
Brad, tell us the history of puttanesca.
Well, in the south of Italy, there's 2 different traditions with puttanesca. One is from Apulia, and it's called St. John's pasta. St. John's feast day is June 24th, and it doesn't have the chilies in it. It basically is capers and anchovies and olives and tomatoes and some other ingredients, some herbs and spices. But then on the other side of the boot, around Naples, it was popularized by prostitutes making a quick sauce between tricks. That's puttanesca, which is a puttana, which means of the whore. And in this sense, it does have chilies. It's a little more spiced up, and they add red wine to it generally. All right, here we are, about 5 minutes into having placed our spaghetti in about 4.5, 5 quarts of boiling salted water. I have a colander set up in the back over here in the sink. And in the meanwhile, I am heating up some of that ghee. You could use oil, olive oil, any kind of oil, and we're going to saute some prawns in there, add a little bit of white wine, then some of our puttanesca, and then put it over our spaghetti, and we're good to go for lunch. Okay, our pasta is ready to strain. I'm going to move it over to my sink. I'm not sure the camera can follow me, but we always save some of the water, so I have a secondary little tub set up to save about 12, 14 ounces of the pasta water. I'll strain the rest, and then I'm going to cool it down. In this case, I'll reheat it with the pasta water because we're not quite ready for lunch. We're going to saute some prawns with the puttanesca. We'll be back in a second. Okay, we have some local pink spot prawns. I'm going to saute in this clarified butter. Adding a touch of white wine. And then our puttanesca. Put a lid on it. Let it simmer for about 30 seconds to a minute. So here we are, the final stages for our lunch. We've got the cooked spaghetti. I'm going to add about 3-4 ounces of that to a bowl. Take a spatula and top it off with about 6 ounces of our sauce with prawns. That's the puttanesca with prawns. And we're going to add a little garnish here today of basil, finely parsley from the garden. Pasta puttanesca with prawns over spaghetti. Buon appetito. Hi again, I'm Brad Inserra, and I'm happy to be here for you to demonstrate how to make a proper pasta puttanesca according to my standards, which aren't exactly Italian standards, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, Monongahela, Pennsylvania, moved to Seattle in 1981, and I had a restaurant in Fremont for 25 years. And again, just to reiterate, I am available for you if you need catering or family assistance, any cooking lessons, you name it, I can provide it. culinarily, at least anyway. I'm kind of getting up there in age. I'm 63. I can still play basketball a little bit. If you want me to hoop with your kids or something like that, I can do that too. Anyway, that said, thank you so much for being here. Buon appetito, and ciao Festa Italia. Ciao.
Vidi o mare quanto è bello, spiratando se ti mette, come tu chi tiene mete, cascetato fai suonare.